First of all, congratulations on the amazing work this season.
Thank you.
Really spectacular. I mean, I've enjoyed Coach, but this season it was just like just got to see so many different aspects of him and really dig into who this character was.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny. I think that's part of the nature of a big ensemble show like we have. It's like every character kind of gets their moments in the limelight, and I think you just kind of have to accept that going in. It's one of the funny things. I mean, as actors, we're always like, oh my gosh, every script that comes out, we want as much as possible in that particular episode, and you just get used to it when you're working on an ensemble show where you're like, you know what, in this episode, there's just not that much Coach Ben, and that kind of goes around the world for all the different characters, even at the very top, even Melanie will have episodes where like there's just not that much Shauna in it, and so it's one of the blessing and curses of an ensemble show, but in this case, I think it's actually really nice the way that it plays out, where you get little segments of each character, kind of like hard scope on them for a little bits of the season.
Yeah, and they really dig into them and let you get to know who they are. Even like as they introduced some or kind of reintroduced some of these characters this season,
Yeah.
you like, well, this isn't going to work. And by the time you see where where they fit into the puzzle, you're like, oh wait, it's as if they were there the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. That is one of the things I will say about this show. I mean, you read some of the online commentary, just not even just this season, but through the whole thing, and you always get people questioning and wondering, like, do the creators, do the writers, do the showrunners, do they really have a plan? Do they really know what they're doing? Or are they just kind of making it up as they go along? And like obviously by nature, television is such that like, yes, of course, some of the stuff you're making up as you go along, or you have to like pivot or deviate from the initial plan just because of unforeseen circumstances. But I can say, having done a lot of television in my career, this is one of those shows that like they know what they're doing and like they have known since the beginning, and there is a lot of stuff that they planned when they pitched this show years and years and years ago that is still being played out right now, like to a T from their initial pitch. So this story and the show are in very good hands.
Well, that kind of transitions into my question was like when you auditioned, how much did you know about Coach Ben? Like, did they give you a few episodes in? Did you know his arc at all?
No, honestly, not at all. We had the pilot script. I think the pilot script was actually all that was written when we auditioned, because this wasn't picked up straight to series. This was picked up as initially, I believe, and the showrunners have talked about this. They initially pitched it without a script. They pitched it as a concept, and an idea, and kind of like a 5 season arc, and then obviously we're picked up to go write the script. And I was lucky enough to have worked with Ashley and Bart before. We both actually kind of had our first big breakouts in the television world together back on the CW days on the originals. So I knew how talented they were. In fact, I remember being very disappointed and upset with them when they left the originals, because I loved how they wrote for me specifically. It was a very happy reunion. And when that script landed in my inbox and I read it, it truly was one of, if not the best pilot scripts I had ever read. And I knew immediately, regardless of what the story was going to be for this character, I was like, this is something that I want to be a part of. I will say, I actually had a lot more information in the pilot than the audience ended up getting. Just by the nature of how we had to shoot the pilot and we got crunched for time, they ended up rearranging some of the story elements. So there was a lot more actually that was revealed in the pilot episode, than in the initial script, than was in the final cut that actually got shown to audiences, which was very interesting. But I didn't find out about the whole leg thing, until we were about to shoot season one. Like when the show got picked up a year later for season one, they were like, "Oh, and by the way, you lose a leg in the second episode." And I was like, "This is information that would have been helpful to know."
Yeah, so I was going to ask about that as well. But how physically demanding was that? Like so you didn't know, so you couldn't like prepare yourself and do like a physical routine.
No, like, well, I mean, I could. So luckily we got from when the show got picked up for its, if you remember, like this show, we filmed the pilot. I think sometimes people forget this or didn't know about it in the first place, but we filmed the pilot at the end of 2019. It was like November and December of 2019. So we all left, in December of 2019 saying, this is amazing. Like, of course it's going to get picked up. We'll see you all in a few months. Like we assumed we'd be filming the first season by March or April of 2020. And of course, the world went to shit. And we basically spent all of 2020 just kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see what was going to happen. So we didn't start shooting the first season until April, or May of 2021. So from when I found out at the end of 2020 to when we started shooting, I did have a good chunk of time. And that was one of the big things I focused on, honestly, from the very beginning. I was like, a, I've never had a physical trauma that is anywhere near what this was. And so I tried to spend a lot of time just researching, talking to people. I mean, I went deep dives on Reddit for people who had had physical traumas like this, specifically amputations, specifically leg amputations, and just learn about not just the physical effects of it, but also, of course, the psychological and the emotional trauma. That's something that I took very seriously, and I wanted to make sure that I was at least attempting to do it justice. But yes, it required a lot of like practice, I will say that, just to kind of, obviously I have my leg, right? So it was not just practice of like, okay, great, how do I make this look real? How do I make it feel real? But also once you get on set and it's like, how do I position my leg in a way that they can do everything they need to do with the camera while also making it work with my legs? So it's a constant dance that we had with the VFX people, with the camera people, with the directors, and everybody just made it work really beautifully. Sometimes I watch it and I'm like, that's amazing. Like it is truly amazing what they can do.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I never once during the series thought that you had a leg. I mean, I even like when I was like prepping for this a little bit, I was thinking, wait, maybe he was an amputee and we just didn't know it, and that you had a because you really sell it, and it's incredible what that does for the character that you can just let watch them and watch them interact and focus on the person rather than like the parlor trick, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, that was a big part of it. And I mean, like I said, there's a lot of brain power that went into all of that. It was a big collaboration with everybody involved to kind of pull that off and make it look real. And like you said, I thought it went really well.
Did it wear on you? Did you like have like leg pains, cramps, stuff like that,
There were
or did it
definitely
quickly?
times like if I mean, I really did. I know this sounds dramatic, but like I really did have to spend a lot of time kind of like stretching, working on mobility, all of that kind of stuff. And if I got lazy for like a couple weeks or something like that, and we had a full day on set, yeah, I would feel it for sure. I would get home and over the weekend just be like, oof, man, I've got to go get a massage or I've got to do some yoga or something because just the way you're like having to contort yourself and oftentimes it's not cheap to digitally remove a leg. And so they were always looking for opportunities to kind of hide the leg in a natural way where they didn't have to go in VFX and take it out afterwards. So a lot of times you'd be setting up a shot and they say, Steven, can you just kind of bend your leg in this particular way and then it'll be blocked by this and we really won't see it. And I'm like, this is the least comfortable thing ever, but if you're not reading it, then great, I can make it work. So yeah, it was a lot of that song and dance.
It was like the '50s when they hide the pregnant bellies behind a counter for
Yeah,
whole
exactly.
seasons.
Yeah, if you go back and watch closely, you'll notice a lot of scenes where I'm just like sitting with a blanket over me. There's a reason for that.
As long as your foot wasn't swinging, you're fine. So let's fast forward quite a bit. When did you learn that your fate would be your head on a dinner plate?
Wow. I mean, the head on the dinner plate, I truly did not know until a couple weeks before that actually happened. But I did know, I did find out very early that the character was going to meet his untimely demise this season. I think it just in some casual, like unofficial conversations, I had kind of been given that heads up, honestly, since the very beginning of the show, that like sometime in season 3 is kind of when they had planned for Coach Ben to meet his end. And then the official call came, honestly, to our showrunner's credit, and I've talked about this in a lot of interviews, where like I've had the privilege, or perhaps unlucky privilege, of working on a lot of shows that involve character deaths, and that has happened to me a number of times. And you usually don't find out until like right before it happens, and that's kind of just a long-standing industry protocol, as I'm sure you know. This was a different scenario. Our showrunners were very generous and they called everybody, myself included, like months ahead of time from when we were starting to film the season and just kind of gave us a heads up on what would be happening. And I had a great chat with them. I mean, my first reaction, of course, is, no actor likes to officially find out that they are going to lose their job. As soon as that happened, I was like, great, but tell me the story. Like, is it cool? How does it happen? What's the arc? And once we got into those conversations, I was like, this is amazing. This is a very cool arc for him to go out on. I'm glad that we're going to get to explore his backstory and his character a little bit more. And also, if you think about it in terms of, the entire series arc, this is kind of a necessary piece of the puzzle, right? This is like a very important inflection point. Coach Ben meeting his end and like the domino effect that happens afterwards. So it was nice to find out early, and it was nice to have like that full scope going into shooting the season so that I could kind of do my work as an actor.
No, I thought your head on the plate led to, I mean, you're acting before, which I'll get into, but your head on the plate led to one of my favorite moments in TV history. That what the
Yes.
fuck exclamation. I was like, I mean, you can. It's there's a the scene in Lost with the hand, uh, not Penny's boat or whatever it was. Things like that.
Right.
Where that all I gives you the chills talking about it. Uh, yeah, like I'll always remember this because at that moment, it like everything just like suddenly went zoom. This
Yes.
series, they know where they're going. I don't know if I like where they're going. I'm watching people being eaten and people just like go feral, but like my faith for in the series completely was restored because
Yeah.
going into that you're like there's a lot of stuff that they were it seemed like they were laying down groundwork but like are they or are they just lost it seemed
Yeah.
are they lost in the
Yeah.
wilderness or are they laying a breadcrumb trail
Yeah.
and then that was the moment and like holy crap after that it was and if it's an amazing 5 episode stretch that has when it was over I was stood up I was like my wife was watching with me. I was like, I can't believe, I can't. I mean, I am so psyched. I want more episodes because I've seen
Oh,
it all. So
I'm so glad that's really kind. I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah, I mean this season, look, we all knew ahead of time that like even though we didn't get the exact scripts, like we usually get scripts, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks out before we start shooting them. And we didn't know exactly all of the details, but we did know that this was kind of the payoff season. We knew that this was the season where a lot of answers were going to be, kind of dealt to the audience. A lot of the seeds that we had planted early on would kind of start to show some blooms. And I think that the beauty of this season in particular, season three, is like the first half of the season is really character driven, right? Like it's all about kind of digging in deeper to some of these characters, Coach Ben included, and kind of laying the groundwork. And then by the time you hit the halfway point of the season, it's like, oh, we're back to the plot driven stuff because we've gotten like all those seeds planted with the characters, and now we get to like really drive the plot forward. And I just think it's kind of a lovely dichotomy when it comes to a TV season, especially when you only have 10 episodes to do it in. You need both, right? Like back in the day when we had 20 something episodes, you had plenty of time to like have one-off episodes where you explored characters in depth. Now it's everything's so condensed that you have to figure out a way to kind of combine that in a very shortened amount of time where you get to live with these characters a little bit and find out who they are while also being enticed by, the plot moving forward and finding out what happens in the story.
yeah, and if you skip those first 5 episodes, the last 5 episodes don't land as well.
Yeah.
They're would feel more hollow,
Yes.
and everything that they put up before it, it's like, oh, now I understand why we were, seeing this interaction. So, well, let me get into some of that a little bit. Well, with your death scene, you had some great scene partners this year and throughout the series. With Misty and Samantha and
Yeah.
Sophie as Nat, and this season with Mari. Um, what was it like shooting that death scene with Sophie? I mean, it's not just a death. It's you're watching this man break and start to kind of implode, and then having to reach out to probably your biggest ally and say, "End my life." How did you prepare for that? How emotional was it for you?
I mean, look, the credit to the writers for, I think, first of all, for kind of fleshing out that scene in the way that they did. I think that, and also for letting that scene play out the way it did in the cut. I mean, this is a show where, we're always trying to find stuff to cut because all of the work is so good that it's really hard to like have an episode that is, shot and then leave it that length because all the episodes would be, an hour and a half long. And the writers and the post people really let that scene live and breathe. Um, ironically, um, when I first found out about exactly what the death scene would be, I was like, this is poetic. This is exactly who it should happen with. It should absolutely be Natalie, that does the final act as kind of a mercy killing. And then also just for me as an actor working with Sophie Thatcher is one of my favorite things in the world. She and I are such different people in real life. I mean, we just have like very different personalities, very different worlds that we live in, and yet every time we are on set together, we lock in so easily. I think that we approached just kind of the art and the craft of acting in a very similar way, and we connected over that very early on in the show, the first time we got to work together. And so that's one of the people that I step on set with, and if I have a scene with her, my entire body just relaxes. I know that I'm not going to have to work too hard. I know that I can just be with her and be present in the moment. And that's kind of exactly how it played out. I mean, I went into that scene obviously knowing what it was and having an idea of how it should look, but I also just kind of like let the idea go once I got onto set because I was like, let's just see what happens with Sophie and I, and we really played off of each other and just kind of like let it breathe as much as possible, and that naturally led to all of the emotion. I mean, this was a long goodbye for the character and for me as an actor on the show as well. So everything just came together really, really beautifully, I thought.
Did you lose weight for the role to be as, sickly
Did.
looking as you were?
Yeah, I did. I kind of played the long game a little bit. I actually started I try to, I'm one of those actors that I like as much information as I possibly can have, anytime I can get it, because to me, part of the job of acting is you have to know more than the audience, right? You have to be able to kind of craft the arc yourself. And to do that, you have to know all of the information. And not every actor works like that. And I totally understand the other side of it too. But for me, this just works a lot better. So from the beginning of the show, when we started season one, my idea was I knew that there would be kind of like a long time out in the wilderness where I would be starving and losing weight. And so at the beginning of season one, I actually put on a lot of weight. I bulked up a little bit, and that fit into the character for me because I was like, you know what? He's this 1990s New Jersey former athlete, kind of like, muscled out beefcake type of guy. I was like, that perfectly fits with the character. And then I knew that I could kind of gradually lose the weight as we went through the series. So by the time we got to season two, I was kind of down to like my normal operating weight. And then going into this season, yeah, I did. I started months out, and the first script that we got, it literally said Ben looks as gaunt as we've ever seen him. Obviously, I haven't been thriving as much as the girls have at the beginning of this season. I've kind of been off on my own, just scrounging for food, trying to catch whatever I can. And so, yeah, that was important to me. I know, there's a whole thing around actors and weights and what they're doing for roles and like how extreme actors go. To me, everything should always be dictated by the story. Like it's never something that's done as like an ego-driven thing because I'm an actor and I want to, control the art of it all. It's like, does the story require this? And this was a case where it was so obvious. Just like looking at the story and looking at the page, I'm like, yes, this is necessary. Um, could they have done a lot of it with just makeup? Maybe, but also there's a psychological thing I think that happens when kind of your physical appearance fluctuates. And I very distinctly remember reading an article about Bradley Cooper years ago when he did American Sniper, and how he had put on quite a bit of weight for that role and like really bulked up. And he talked about the psychological effect that it had on him, where like, he would be walking down the street and accidentally bump into somebody and they would just kind of like bounce off of him, like a fly because he was so big and he had never experienced that as a person before. And just like what that does to your psyche, knowing that's the kind of power that you have as a human being that's that big. Um, for me, it was the exact inverse, of course. Losing all of that weight, it really did make me feel small. It made me feel defeated. And I think there was probably a time early on in the series when Ben felt like even with one leg, he probably could have overpowered, a lot of these girls if he needed to, right? Physically. This season, that was absolutely not the case. There were multiple times when we were filming where I was like, I couldn't fend them off. If they truly attack me right now, there's nothing I can do. They are stronger than I am, and I feel weak mentally and physically, and that's exactly what I wanted. That's the headspace that I wanted to be living in for this season. So, outside of just the aesthetic stuff, I think it all came together in a really cohesive way.
Well, that kind of gets into the what I was going to talk about next with Mari. So there was moments where you're not sure if you're there, if you're going to kill her or help her, where that all played out, how that was going to play out, and what was going on with Coach internally at that point. It also led to one of my favorite scenes of the season, the double macing. I thought was hilarious, which is to come out to this very tense moment where you're watching and you're like, and you're kind of fearing for both their lives. Is she going to kill him? Is he going to kill her? Are
Yeah.
they both being genuine and not and not going to harm each other? So did you know? Did they tell you how to play that? Did they tell you you are actually harmless to her, or did they like what was the direction on that?
No, I mean, that's the look, the writers and the directors, and we were very lucky to have Jonathan Lisko, who's one of our showrunners, directing that episode, specifically with Mari and I in the cave. And of course, it's lovely to have showrunners directing just because they know the show better than anybody, right? They know not just the characters, but they know the overall story and series arc. So it was lovely to have him in that position during that episode. And um, thankfully, he put so much trust and just faith in me personally. And he kind of let me do whatever I was going to do. And of course we talked about it. And one of the things that occurred to me was I never believed that Ben is a killer. I never believed that he had that in him or that that was something that he could possibly be driven to do, unless maybe it was him, turning that on himself, as we saw in season two. Um, but in that scene in particular, I think the thing that I was wrestling with internally was I'm not going to kill her, but also by doing this, the emotion comes from the fact that I know that I'm kind of signing my own death warrant. Like the second that I set her free, I know that she's going to go back and rat me out. I know that she's going to tell everybody where I was and they're going to come for me. And what that ultimately means, I don't know, but it's definitely not going to be good. And so I think that there's a lot of emotion in knowing that this is what I have to do. I can't just keep this girl here forever and I'm not going to kill her. And yet at the same time, this probably ultimately ends up meaning that I am on the chopping block.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things as you're doing it, like that's the right thing, and then oh, don't do this. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
goodbye, goodbye, coach.
That whole episode was just like, I mean, it was just like this, It was just like there was like funny stuff, there was crazy stuff, there was emotional stuff. It was wild.
In the cave, Ben is talking to himself. Another, did you know? Did you know who he's talking to? Did they say, Ben's talking to himself, Ben's talking to a voice?
Yeah, yeah. I can tell you that yeah, that was not, I mean, we had conversations about it and I think that the writers maybe had their ideas, but there was never a set like, hey, this is who you're talking to. So they again, I'm grateful. It doesn't always happen, but I'm grateful that I had built up enough goodwill with our writers and our producers that they trusted me enough to kind of do it in the way that I felt like made the most sense for the character and the way that resonated the most with me. And to me, this is an entirely psychological thing, like think about the fact that I know, we did a time jump at the beginning of this season, right? So it essentially been like 6 months since the end of season two, and 6 months on your own in the wilderness, going through what Ben had been going through and trying to just like scavenge for food. He's very deteriorated at this point. That does stuff to the brain, and you have to figure out ways to cope with that. And so for me, that's all that was. I was talking to whoever I thought might be there, whether it was my subconscious, whether it was my alter ego, whether it was Paul. I was just trying to make conversation with anybody. And that's obviously the scene that we saw is not the first time that I had been talking to somebody. But what else do you do? I mean, I'm in my real life, I'm one of those people that talks out loud to myself all the time. Like, even when I'm just home alone, walking through the kitchen and like doing dishes, I'm like, talking to myself about, okay, what's the next thing I have to do? What's on my to-do list? And then just saying stuff out loud. And so that came naturally to me. And I thought that it played really well and it was very well written.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, people are still debating, and
Which I love. That's the
who was
nature
he
of our
talking to?
show.
Is
Yeah.
Yeah, which is fantastic,
What you
because
want.
I love that the answers have been very slow to be revealed, and some of the answers I'm not even sure if they're as black and white as people think. I think there's some things out there
There
that
are, yeah.
maybe in another season we'll completely flip our perspective on that with
Yeah.
some kind of a reveal.
It's very possible. At the same time, I think, look, this is one of those shows that like you have to walk a very fine line. Like I think that obviously you want some answers, right? As an audience member, you want like some concrete answers to like grab onto and know that this story is anchored in something that you can wrap your mind around. But you don't want to like spell out everything. I think that part of this story is allowing people to kind of interpret it the way that they're going to based on their own life experiences, based on how they're connecting with these characters and with the story itself. And so I like the idea that, yes, of course, we connect some of the dots for people and we kind of make it clear about how things went down out there. And then there's some stuff that we leave a little bit more vague and ambiguous. For instance, I don't think we're ever really going to find out. I don't know if we're ever really going to know who burned down the cabin or what happened to the cabin. I think that's one of those great stories that's like, was it Ben? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Was it, other Ty? Was it just, a spark that got lifted in the wind from having a bunch of open flames in an old wooden cabin? Who knows? But the important thing is the effect that it had on the group and what happened afterwards, like what transpired because of those events.
So now that Coach Ben is dead, are you given privy to any information, or are you just kind of left in the dark as to where the season is going to, or not the season, but the series will conclude, where it's heading?
I mean, I'm sure I'll find out. I don't, that's the beauty of our show is like we don't really find out as a cast until we're getting ready to shoot that season. Like they really do. I mean, they keep things pretty close to the vest as far as what the long term plan is. If I really, took them to dinner and gave them a bunch of wine and sake, they might let a few things slip. But no, I honestly don't know. I mean, yes, I still continue to receive all the scripts and everything, which is really fun. So I know how this season plays out, and I went, of course, stayed in Vancouver and went back to set a bunch of times and hung out and visited. So I loved watching this season play out. I don't know exactly where we're going in season four. I do know that, they want to be able to tell part of the story from when they actually do get rescued and get back, because I think that that's a really important part of the story as well, right? Like, how do they re-enter society? How do they cope with that after being out there for so long? So I'm sure that that is a part of the story that we're going to get. I don't know exactly when. Um, and as we've seen on this show, I don't think that just because a character dies means that that's the last time you're going to see that face. So I'm sure there are opportunities for Ben to return as a, I don't know, a ghost, a hallucination, a dream, a flashback. Who knows?
That's like the exciting thing. The thing is, you have to determine what weight you know you have to
I
be at.
know, I know. We got to see where Ben. I mean, I would imagine he's like back in his healthy mode. He's like, probably looking good. He's got the beard shaved off. He's a happy guy with Paul somewhere. I don't know. Um, I would love to see like Ben team up with Misty in the present day and like solve some crimes with her and Walter. I mean, I think that would be hilarious. But yeah, there's endless possibilities, and I'm sure that the writers will have some fun ideas going forward.
You mean in her head? Like,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
in her head, or yeah, exactly. He's like a ghost, and she's like, okay, great. I don't know why I'm seeing this ghost of Ben, but great, here he goes.
ghost detective. That'd be great. Coach Ben,
Yeah.
ghost detective.
Yeah.
So I got just a couple more quick questions. What was the vibe like on set? Any was because it's very obviously a very dark series, but you've
hmm
got this big crew of kind of young adults and or pretty much all young adults.
Yeah.
So what was it like for 6 months every year?
It was, I mean, look, this was a show where because of the nature of how season one went down, this was a little bit unique. We showed up for season one, and if you think about it, it was a year and a half after we shot the pilot. So like we didn't have, and it was COVID year in the middle. So like we didn't have a ton of contact with one another in between when we shot the pilot and when we showed up for season one. So there was a lot of like reacclimation that had to happen, and like even like names. Like there were a couple people whose like names I didn't quite remember when we showed up for season one. Um, we were also in Canada, still kind of at the height of COVID in 2021, and the border was closed, if you remember those days. So we got there and we were essentially trapped. This was very much like life imitating art. We were kind of stuck there all together. We couldn't leave. We couldn't really have people come visit us until almost the end of season one. So it was just us. And we had to figure out kind of like how to survive as a group, just socially, just like mentally and psychologically when we were away from our loved ones. That's not a normal situation when you're shooting a TV show. So all that to say, we became very close very fast, just like as a unit on the kind of 1996 wilderness side of the cast, and that carried over. Even when we got back for seasons two and then season three, and we were a little bit more free to kind of come and go and travel and have people visit us. That closeness never really subsided, and so we were very tight as a cast. And one of the things that I really appreciated about this cast in particular is everybody was really good at reading the room. And if we had heavy days on set where like, especially particular performers, particular actors had really big, heavy stuff, there was always space and grace given to those actors, and there wasn't a lot of like laughing and joking going on in the cast tent. And then other days it would just be a free for all and everybody was just having a great time, and everybody's laughing and joking around and doing fun stuff. So this is one of the best casts I've worked with, and I'm going to miss a lot of them very, very dearly.
Did they give you a send off when Coach Ben died? Was there a barbecue or something?
Yeah, yeah, that's a tradition. That's a tradition on this show. We always do. We started in season one where we do funeral parties, just because we knew that there would be a lot of people dying on this show, and so I think our first funeral party was for Laura Lee, and then it just the tradition kind of continued. Every time a character died, we would have a nice little funeral party, and everyone would come and dress in black. So we did that for me this season. Courtney Eaton and Sophie Nélisse were very kind. They're two of my closest friends on the show, and they hosted it at their place, and they printed up little funeral programs with my picture on it, and like dates and a little eulogy in it, and somebody made a cake that was a leg. That was hilarious and disgusting. But yeah, it was a great time, and it's just like a great fun way to kind of celebrate not just the character and the arc of the show, but also just our relationships as actors and as castmates, to kind of come together and just have a good time with no pressure.
Right. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, rest in peace, Coach Ben, and thank you for your time and your work on the series. And I really enjoyed it. And then hearing this kind of inside perspective, you watch it, it's easy to appreciate as a viewer, but to hear, the all the work, the mental work, the physical work that goes into this, really makes you appreciate it even more. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for chatting. That's great to hear, honestly. This is one of those shows that I can tell you there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I mean, just not just from the actors, but from everybody that's involved, the crew, the writers, the producers. I mean, it is a heavy, heavy lift of a show to make. So, yeah, anytime I'm able to give some backstory and some insight, I think that always helps. But this has been great. Thanks for taking the time, and hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, Stephen.
All right, thank you, Stephen.
Have a nice day.
Cheers.